Hi there, my name is John Moore, and I practice and teach shamanism from the great state of Maine in the northeast of the US. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the psychology of the shamanism, or sort of the intersection of psychology and shamanism. It's a broad subject, so I'm going to hit on some highlights, and I'm going to talk about sort of the psychology of shamans themselves, like how they think that might be different than non-shamanic people. I'm going to talk about the shamanic view of psychology through the lens of, say, mental illness. I've done other videos on shamanism and mental illness. And I'm also going to talk about sort of how sometimes modern psychology and shamanism are finding some overlaps, and that is pretty uh, in my opinion, a really good thing. Like I take a lot of, I think that's really helpful. And I'll say that I have been in my trainings. I've had therapists, like when I've been teaching classes, I've had therapists. I've had therapists as clients, have therapists as as students now and clients. So, pardon me for the mess. Every time I get on a video and start talking, the shaman cat shows up. This is Phoebe. Say hi, Phoebe. She is trouble. Trouble. Every time I get on a video, Phoebe likes to show up and be the center of attention. So that's cat psychology. We're talking about shamanic and shaman psychology today. So the thing to understand about shamans is that they all come from a cultural context, meaning, every tribal group or culture that is shamanic has shamans, and those shamans are A, individual human beings, and B, products of the culture, right? That being said, if the culture is shamanic, that means a couple things about it. One is that it has to some degree, um, embrace animism. Animism is the idea that things, not just things that we think of as living things like cats and people, are have spirit, right? So yes, trees have spirit, but so do rocks, so do mountains, so do rivers, right? I think of Shinto in Japan, and Shinto isn't necessarily shamanic, but it is animistic, right? So they have the kami, the nature gods that reside in waterfalls and rocks and forests and things like that. But all shamanic cultures are animistic, meaning they believe in spirits. Another important thing about shamanic cultures that impacts the psychology of the shaman is that there is usually a reverence for ancestors, which is extended to elders in the culture, right? There's this understanding that elders hold wisdom and that our ancestors are connections to the spirit world. So, um, things like ancestor worship might happen in a shamanic culture, or even shamans meeting ancestors in the spirit world to gain power. Okay, so that's one set of ideas about shamanic psychology, is that we're all products of the cultures that we exist in, that we were raised in. We're products of our education. We're products of our family. And yes, we self-determine a lot about ourselves, but people who take to the shamanic path would have to find truth in animism and find truth in ancestor worship, ancestral healing, ancestral connection, find truth in the spirit world, and the idea of helping spirits is an important concept in shamanism, is helping spirits. So again, individual cultural differences, but some overlap. And I think, like, for me, part of that is shamanism is a path of personal individual revelation. This is different than some spiritual systems, some religions, for example, in which people are not supposed to receive direct revelation. You're supposed to go to a priest or specially ordained person to get the information about God or spirit or whatever, and only through them can you receive blessings and guidance and that sort of thing. Where in shamanism, if you are a shaman or shamanic practitioner, you are getting those revelations for yourself, and you don't. There's no authority higher than you, right? It's you in the spirit world, and you're standing on the same level and having, having relationship. We live in relationship to spirit. So that's an important idea, right? Is that shamanism is non-patriarchal, non-hierarchical, meaning patriarchies, like we see in modern Western culture, tend to be in a pyramid structure. You have one important guy on top and a bunch of lesser important people and a bunch of lesser important people. So think about like the government of the United States. We have a president, arguably the most important person. Below him, we have, the Congress, the House, and the Senate. And even in those organizations, we have Speaker of the House and House Majority Leader, House Minority Leader. So there's the structure of leadership that goes down. Below that, we have, or even sometimes on the same level, we have tiers of bureaucracy of unelected officials. People report up to Congress, and then at the very bottom are the um, us, the citizens, the people who live here. But again, the power structure goes up. In non-patriarchal power structures, power is shared, right? Power is dispersed. Um, you might say that's communism or that's socialism or whatever, and it really isn't, because even in communist structures and socialist structures, there's usually people on top. There's usually one guy, or and people under him. And we see this is throughout the world. It's not about political power structures. It's about patriarchal power structures. And so this is the same in traditional Western religions as well, where you have somebody on top, group of people under them, and at the very bottom are everyday people. So shamans are all about empowering other people. That's an important motivation. When I work with a client, we are meeting as peers, okay? And I tell them that all healing is self-healing. I'm just here to facilitate. I'm here because I, have some skill in order to be able to kind of mediate between the spirit world and the client, and to help set things up so that the person can heal. But ultimately, there's work for them to do too. And I'm not better than, smarter than, any of that comparison. I'm not a guru. You don't bow down to me. And we're going to work together to maximize your power, to maximize your healing ability. And I'm all about empowering clients. I'm all about empowering students to get their own answers, okay, for things. So that's an important part of shamanistic psychology. Speaking of the psychology of the shaman themselves, what are they looking at? Now, an important part of psychology is how we look at what we might call mental illness, right? So the term mental illness comes from a very medical Western traditional allopathic perspective. And I'm going to say that there's you know I won't say there's nothing wrong with that, because there's stuff wrong with every large system like that, but it's a valuable system, right? Allopathic medicine, very good at lots of things. But one of the things about it is that it has very strict diagnostic requirements for everything. And if somebody comes in to be diagnosed and they are low energy and feeling sad and all of these things, they might be diagnosed with clinical depression, for example, or major depressive disorder, where a shaman is going to view things not kind of diagnostic. The diagnosis that a shaman does is going to say this person somehow has lost power. They've lost some of their power, they've lost their joy, they've lost some of their connection. What's going on here? They're going to look at root spiritual causes. Now, in some cultures, shamans are also doing things like plant medicine, or maybe body work, or other sort of modalities. But strictly shamanically speaking, they're going to look and say, oh, this person, what happened that this person has lost their power? and they're going to look for causes for that on the spiritual level and work with the client to deal with that, right? Same thing with somebody coming in with like PTSD, for example, right? Post traumatic stress disorder. Most shamanic practitioners, healers would look at that and say, oh, this person has experienced what we call soul loss. They've experienced trauma that caused some fracturing in their soul, right? And it's up to us to help guide those parts back so the person, the client, can reintegrate those. So this is the thing with something as complex as trauma and what's called soul retrieval, which is the ceremony for helping to mend those things, is that the healing, like the shaman guides the soul part back with helping spirits, and but the person has to do work to reintegrate that part, to make sure that part feels comfortable, stays, and works as part of the team, right? Um, so the other another aspect of mental illness that I'll touch on is people who have issues with psychosis, where they are seeing things, hearing things, they're having what we'd call hallucinations, right? And I have a little bit of experience, clients with diagnosed with psychotic disorders. Lots of people contact me with sort of schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. And I honestly sometimes struggle with that because I understand people want to go off their medication, but the medication is keeping them safe. And I can't work, if somebody has a diagnosed condition ethically, I can't work with them if they're not getting all of the help that they need. I will work with people with diagnosed mental health conditions, but not in lieu of seeking help or going off their meds or whatever it is, because it's unethical for me to put anybody in any kind of danger or to have any sort of negative outcome. The other aspect of that is I think sometimes people have unrealistic expectations, like I'm going to work with a client for an hour and a problem that they've been struggling with their entire life is going to, magically disappear. If I could do that, if anybody could do that, they would, that's all they would ever do. That's all I would ever do. I would set up shop in a hospital somewhere and people would just come see me and walk out cured. I would never do anything else. I would never do another YouTube video or write or do anything that I do if I or anybody else had that ability. Shamans tend, because healing is spiritual, sometimes people expect it to be miraculous, like instantaneous. And sometimes that occurs. Sometimes there's an immediate relief of symptoms, but there generally is always going to be further work to do. Further work, maybe by the shaman, but definitely by the person who's gone through that. Just because you've gotten relief from depression or PTSD symptoms or whatever, you still need to do your work. You still need to do your integration. You still need to do whatever it is that the shaman has said that you should be doing. So that's sort of the shamanic aspect or the shamanic viewpoint of what the Western medicine diagnoses as mental illness. Um, Now, from a health perspective, physical health, mental health, spiritual health, shamans view that as a continuum of interpenetrating and interlocking concerns, meaning we don't separate physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health. Those are not separate things. Humans exist as a giant spectrum of things. So, for example, I have a physical body, which you can see video of. I have a physical body. That physical body is not a simplistic thing. It's incredibly complex. Endocrine system, respiratory system, circulation system, skeletal system, muscles, um, DNA, food that I digest, everything affects this body, including how I think, right? And on a spiritual level, my what's going on for me spiritually is affecting how I think and affecting my body and vice versa. So it all, it all kind of goes back and forth. So when you go to a shamanic healer, what they're looking for are the spiritual roots. There's any sort of spiritual causes of any disorder that you might have, or anything that's contributing to you not being able to heal. And so they'll work with you. So, for example, somebody I know who is a shamanic teacher um, went in to get knee replacement surgery, for example, and that's not something I would do shamanically, is replace your knee. Went in for surgery, but when she was in recovery after the surgery, had shamanic healers working on her. And then when she went back to her surgeon for her, whatever it was, 6-week consult or whatever, he was amazed at her level of healing. He's like, "You've healed in 6 weeks, what usually takes months to heal." And that's because she had the support, the underlying support of people who understood that spiritual and psychological support also heals the body. So the same thing, if you have depression or some, again, diagnosed mental illness, there are things you can do physically to help your healing process. There are things you can do mentally to help your healing process, seeking talk therapy, for example. And there are things you can do spiritually to help your healing process, whether that's going to a shamanic healer or going to some other type of spiritual healer energy practice. If you're a religious person, talking to your clergy person, as long as they're good at counseling, can be very helpful, right? Getting that support you need. Sometimes we just need support. And the way that I describe this to a lot of clients is what I do, the way I consider what I do is I am helping with my helping spirits to create the conditions under which you heal. I'm not healing you. I'm creating conditions, I'm helping to create conditions under which you heal. So if you break your arm, you go to the hospital, they set the bone and they put a cast on. The cast is not healing your bone. The cast is creating conditions for your bone to knit together in the best possible way, and so that it doesn't move around, the bone doesn't move around and mess up your healing. Now, if you go out, you get your, the cast put on and you go out and you cut the cast off and whack your arm against something, you're going to undo your healing ability. And so the same thing is true with when clients see me and I give them things to do for integration work or whatever, and they don't do it. They're not helping to create they're not helping the healing along. Okay. So get I'm a big fan of firing on all pistons, getting all the support you can for healing, whether that's, for mental health, talk therapy. If you feel like medication would be helpful and it's recommended, doing medication at the same time. There's good, you know, talk therapy and medication tend to go well together. If you're going to do, if you're going to do medication, adding talk therapy to that, the research shows that that's a good choice. Um, so let me talk just briefly about some of the ways that I see psychology and shamanism, modern psychology and shamanism intersecting and potentially working together. So, as I stated, I've been in classes with therapists and psychologists, shamanic classes with therapists and psychologists who are learning new ways of looking at mental health. Um, I have students who are therapists. I have had clients who are therapists and have clients who are therapists. So I think there is a lot of interest. On top of that, I go where I go to the doctor is part of it's a practice that's part of a big hospital system, and they have a lot of residents that come through, and so I get seen by different people every couple of years, and the vast majority of people going through there are studying what they call integrative medicine, which does incorporate a lot of mind body healing. So I think, um, there is, in my experience, I'm seeing a not a complete turn away from allopathic medicine. I still think there's great value there, but an incorporation of let's take all these things that work from all of these different systems and how do we integrate them and use them together. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, Carl Jung, the famous psychoanalyst who, um, is responsible for ideas like archetypes, the shadow, the earliest personality tests came out of the Jungian school. So a lot of psychology, um, particularly therapeutic and psychoanalytic type psychology, comes from a background that was informed by shamanism, and Jung was had a lot of, I would say, more spiritual revelations and things that he was talking about. So there are some real good intersections there, and I would like to, and I've in fact I've been called to consult at a psychiatric hospital with somebody that is not responding to not traditional, I guess, modern medication. And I think that's really cool. I think that's as long as it's helpful, I'm happy to help. I think it's really good when we incorporate these things. And I think it's really good when people get as much support as they feel like they need. Very recently, there was we had a sort of a big mass tragedy here, and a I don't want to recap it too much, but up where I live, there was a mass shooting, and it has really struck the community really hard, and I've offered some help to folks that I know who were impacted, and I'm sure I know there are other practitioners who are working in that regard as well. And those people need other types of support. They need ongoing trauma therapy and that sort of thing. So I really like the way people are coming together and working together. I would like to see more of that. I'm always happy to, talk with people from the medical field or the psychotherapy fields to talk about a different perspective. And like I said, I've got clients and students who are both come from those backgrounds. I've had doctors and dentists and therapists as students and part of my learning cohort. So I really like it when I see that stuff. Anyway, just a little bit on shamanic psychology. I hope that's been helpful. Please, if you like this, subscribe to the channel. There's also now a membership that you can join where there are a bunch of perks. You can see more information about that in the link below. I will talk to you real soon. Love you all. Take care.